Good morning. Now I want to take you back to something very ancient with an equally ancient technology. Roger originally asked me to speak about landscapes of the mind, and I'll stay with this attractive conceit and take you back to the 6th century AD. What was the mental landscape of those living here in the Adriatic in the 6th century? They had little concept of East and West because they belonged to the Mediterranean world, the Roman world of the empire. Extreme east for them was probably the river Euphrates bordering on Persia, and the extreme west would have been the northwest corner of Spain or Brittany, perhaps even Cornwall. Consider the presence of Theodora. Her name means gift of God in this world. She was an entertainer, often condemned as a whore. Justinian, the emperor, was so enthralled by her gifts, he raised her to the throne as his empress. She returned the favor by her example in a famous incident in 532, when his rule was threatened by the mob in Constantinople, declaring that she would prefer to die in the purple rather than flee. And together they triumphed and went on to build Hagia Sophia, a vast church with the largest dome in the world for the next 900 years, still standing in Istanbul today. Here's the interior. How wide was the impression made by the Empress Theodora? I think we have to think of the remotest areas in this world, and I've already indicated where they are, east and west. And these are very curiously present in the mental landscape of the 6th century. It's very difficult for us to imagine something which is quite so remote, not just on the edge like Lindisfarne, where such beautiful manuscripts were produced, but something which is central to our world, but is also out there in space. For the 6th century, I argue, it would be here in the Sinai Peninsula, a most unforgiving landscape, and more specifically here on the Holy Mountain. Today, steps are cut for the pilgrims. Moses had no such convenience, nor did he have the cigarette butts to show him the way down, which was the only way we could find our way down in the dark, because when the sun sets on Sinai, it is total black. And we had torches, but we were alone on the Holy Mountain. But it was here, at the site of the burning bush, that Moses ascended to receive the composition and delivery of the 10 Commandments. And to protect the holy men who had settled around the burning bush below the mountain, and who lived there to thank the Lord for this even greater gift of the law, Justinian and Theodora built them a remarkable fortification, dispatching an army for about over 2,000 kilometers from Constantinople to build it. At the center of the monastery is the Basilica of St. Catherine, and a few years ago I was privileged to crawl into the roof space. The timbers are perfectly preserved, as the conditions are too hot and dry even for termites. And there, carefully carved on plaques attached to the cross timbers, originally in glorious red coloring, you can read the inscription. And this one is at the top. I have shown you the word Theodoras, and it is from the inscription that reads, "For the commemoration and perpetual rest of our Empress Theodora." She had died in 548, and so we know, because this says this is for her perpetual rest, that she was already dead when this inscription was put up. There is also one for the architect, Stephanos, and for his children, and one for the emperor, of course, and he is still alive, and so they just pray for his soul. And the red below is the red of the coloring of the letters on the beam, And the red and gold decoration is on the underface of the beam, which is what you see inside the basilica as you look up to the ceiling rafters. Very spectacular. Now let us travel approximately 2,000 kilometers in the other direction from Constantinople to Ravenna, just south of here, to the church of San Vitale. Here she is. The Empress Theodora, in the famous mosaic with her ladies-in-waiting, opposite her husband, Justinian, in an image that recorded the nature of imperial regalia and splendor for centuries to come. Other signs of her collaboration with the emperor are preserved on capitals in churches that they both patronized. And these have monograms in the center of the capital at bottom right, which interlace their names. In both Ravenna and Sinai, 6th century mosaic decoration almost contemporaneously preserves an Old Testament association of the Holy Mountain. In both, Moses is shown approaching the burning bush, where he takes off his sandals as ordered, and then climbs the mountain to receive the law. Here he is at San Vitale, taking off his sandals. These are the bush, it is the burning bush, and the rocky landscape is rendered, although the colors at San Vitale are so glorious that they could not resist contrasting the red and the green. Sinai would have been all brown. And at Sinai, you see on the triumphal arch, Moses taking off his sandal in front of a real burning bush on the left and receiving the law on the right. And I think we have, Moses receiving the law is at the top right. He has actually turned his face away from God while he holds out his hands to receive the tablets of the law. And the mosaic artist at San Vitale had forgotten that opposite, he has shown Moses taking off his sandals, so he's still wearing them here. Nonetheless, the key thing is that these two monuments, so distant, both draw on the Old Testament inspiration of Moses and the Holy Mountain. At Sinai, this is related to the New Testament description of the Transfiguration. When Christ was transfigured, the three apostles were terrified, and Moses and Elijah stand either side because those are the two Old Testament prophets who saw God. At Ravenna, the associated images are of Isaiah and Jeremiah, who foretell the incarnation. Jeremiah at the top left, Elijah on the opposite side. While the story of Abraham and Isaac clearly display the greatest sacrifice demanded of Abraham and the celebration of his obedience by Melchizedek, the high priest. No, we don't have Melchizedek, the high priest. But the mosaics at Ravenna display a preoccupation with the holy landscape of key events from the Old Testament. The desert mountain of the Sinai Peninsula, associated with views of paradise. And this is hinted at both at Sinai in the Transfiguration, where you see the mandala of holy light, and above, though, sorry, not on this slide, traces of the clouds in white, blue, and red, which represent heaven. And at Ravenna, in the same picture of heavenly clouds, above Christ seated on the orb of the world, with archangels to either side and the patrons of the church. And this glimpse of heaven inspires the worshipper who longs to enter that world. Yet both scenes are set in this unforgiving desert associated with Moses as he led the children of Israel out of Egypt towards the promised land, as recounted in Exodus. Landscape in the 6th century AD still retained this original significance. There it is. The church on top of the Holy Mountain is another 6th century chapel to which the pilgrims go when they have come to the very top of the mountain and pay their respects. The quite extraordinary element of Theodora's presence in these distant places is that no image of her survives from Constantinople, the imperial capital. We know there were many of them, and there is a splendid description of one in Procopius. He says, "There also the Empress Theodora stands upon a column, which the city in gratitude for the court dedicated to her. The statue is indeed beautiful, but still inferior to the beauty of the Empress. For to express her loveliness in words or to portray it in a statue would be, for a mere human being, altogether impossible. The column is purple, and it clearly declares, even before one sees the statue, that it bears an empress, purple being the color associated with the emperor and empress." Another long description in the church of St. Sergius and Bacchus in Constantinople also records her direct presence. Here it is. It runs along the lintel. You can see it in the top left in a shadow, and right around the church, bottom left, you have some very clear letters. It's a 12 dodecasyllable Greek verse recording the patronage of the emperor and empress and signaling out the Empress Theodora as the person responsible for the building. I think we have another with a slightly clearer image of the Greek letters, which run all around the church. You see it above the capitals and in the plaque. And most interesting, this octagonal building in Constantinople, which survives to today, and now adapted as a mosque, has a segmented dome built on top of an octagon, and it was the model for the church of San Vitale in Ravenna, which was in turn the model for the octagon at Aachen, Aix-la-Chapelle, built by Charlemagne after the year 800. And this is clear, this inspiration, from this is the octagonal form. You can imagine as you enter from the west that if there had been an inscription, it would have run all the way around the church above the marble revetment. We are looking to the east end and the apse. And there we see the image of Ecclesius. His name is cut off, but here is his image, his portrait. He was the bishop who built the church, and you can see he's offering a model of the church to Christ. And it is clearly an octagon. And an octagon had not been built in the West since the great church of Santa Costanza in Rome. So it was an architectural innovation. Now, Bishop Ecclesius, we know, had been sent to the capital Constantinople by the Gothic king Theodoric on a mission. And he must have visited the church of St. Sergius and Bacchus in the capital, which was newly consecrated. And there he would have seen the long dedication to Theodora, and when he came back, he built this octagonal church, though it's not at all sure that he would have put up the portrait mosaic that we see. But since Theodora especially favored one particular group of Christians, the Monophysite monks, who were generally condemned as heretics, and this monument became their center, we can also see a clear indication of her patronage for her group of preferred Christians. What an extraordinary woman she was. So Bishop Ecclesius returned to Italy and set about constructing the octagonal church, and we see him in the apse. So then Theodora is not given the position of patron, but as you see her standing opposite her husband Justinian, you realize the power of the Byzantine Empire in the 6th century. Today we can admire them as the rarest of 6th century images, the sole surviving mosaic representations of the couple who ruled the Roman world from 527 to 565. They inspired images of the landscape based on Old Testament stories. And there is another mental landscape as well, a single empire of authority and hierarchy that celebrated the gift of God in the person of a woman who, across the Roman Mediterranean world, from Sinai to Ravenna. Thank you.